I have learned not to just blindly trust what my doctors are telling me. I need to just start learning more about my diabetes.
If I put that insulin in my body, I really need to eat in 15 or 20 minutes or whatever I planned for. Because when I don't eat, I will go really low really fast.
I don't think diabetes is random. I think there's a lot of moving parts, which can make it seem really chaotic. But as we start to understand some of the main components, for me at least, life became much easier.
At that point, it kind of hit me and I realized, okay, if I don't change something, I might not be able to see again. Hey everyone, welcome to the Diabetes Unlocked podcast. I'm Tom.
And I'm Christelle, and together we have over 60 years of experience living with type 1 diabetes.
That's right, 60 plus years, but we haven't always gotten it right. So in this episode, we'll be sharing our biggest diabetes mistakes and more importantly, what we learned from them. Let's get into it.
I want to start with you today, Tom, because I know that you have a little bit of a rebel strike to you. You kind of, based on our discussions previously, about your diabetes story, growing up with diabetes, it sounds like you're not always good with, people telling you what to do and authorities in general. So you just being you, also being young with diabetes, what would you say are some of the major mistakes that you had to make for yourself? And what have you learned from it?
Yeah, I'm a rebel, that's right. And I made a lot of mistakes when I was teenager, some of them knowingly, some of them not even knowing that I'm making mistakes. But what I want to say before I get into it is, we're not doing this episode to make anyone feel bad because they're making the kind of mistake I was making or you were making. We just want to talk about what we've done in the past, what we learned from our mistakes, and what kind of helped us to get on the right track. Because I think both of us are right now in a good spot with, living with type 1, accepting that we have type 1 and sort of managing our life the way we want. And I think we're quite happy with where we are right now. So if anyone is not in that spot right now, we don't want you to blame yourself or feel bad about it. We just really want to have an open conversation. And I'm already getting a bit emotional because it's not my it's not my strengths to talk about my mistakes. And so, you said when I was a teenager, I was rebellious. I didn't really care that much about my diabetes. And I think when I was thinking about it before we started recording, is the reason for that was I didn't really accept that I have diabetes. I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to do all the things that my friends were doing. And I didn't want to care about my diabetes, checking my blood sugar, eating well, counting carbs, and all those things that go with it. And I remember when I was 15 or 16, my HbA1c that was the highest HbA1c I ever had. It was 13.3%. Just to give you an idea, that means that my average blood sugar during that time was, I looked it up today, 335 milligrams per deciliter or 18.3 millimole, which is like really high blood sugar. Thinking back about this time is I was running with high blood sugar, sort of half intentionally, half because I didn't know any better, because I didn't want to deal with hypo and I didn't even feel bad physically. My blood sugar was super high, but my body was used to it. So I actually felt quite fine. But I'm sure that back then I did a lot of damage to my body. And I think it was a mistake that I might pay off later on. We don't know, but I'm sure I did a lot of damage to my body and that was a mistake. I wish I could go back and do a lot of things differently. But it took me a lot of time to realize, to find my way to accept that I have type 1 diabetes and find my way around it, if that makes sense. And I sort of needed to find my why I should actually care. What's the why for me, why I should manage the condition as good as I can, and what's in it for me. And that took me a really, really long time. But I think I found a few whys, and that's why I got to a better spot now. So I hope that sort of makes sense. I know I'm starting to ramble a little bit, but did you ever have that sort of period, Crystal, when you didn't accept your diabetes? I think you didn't really go through this, did you?
No, for me, the acceptance came like right away, which I think it's also a personality thing. It's kind of like, I was like, I'm dealt this card. Okay. I deal with it. But that's also, I was 19. I didn't grow up with diabetes. I was a young adult when I was diagnosed, which I do think is a difference. So I get to be, as you said, quote unquote, a normal kid growing up, being able to do all the things that I had no restrictions as from a diabetes perspective, right? So I think the acceptance was there from the beginning. I think we've used this phrase before. I want to double click on something you said. And one of the things that you said was lack of knowledge. You said that you were doing maybe not the best that you could because there was some denial there, clearly, but you also didn't necessarily know. You didn't necessarily, it sounded like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, obviously, so stop me if I'm going off the wrong tangent, but you didn't necessarily know how to have the optimal care for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I knew that what I'm doing is not what I should be doing. I knew thing or two, what I should be doing, but I didn't feel like doing those things that I was taught to do. And I think I was, every time I went to see my endocrinologist, I know they would check my HbA1c. I already knew this would be high. I already knew, there would be a big discussion about it. And I just lost the appetite to, I was just frustrated by all this. I didn't want to have to deal with it. And I didn't really have any friends in the type 1 community. I didn't have a friend who would be going through the same and maybe found a way through it, how to manage the condition and at the same time, doing all the things that I wanted to do. So I maybe didn't have a good sparring partner or a mentor that might have helped me a lot back then. I think someone who would not be an authority that was forced on me, but someone who could sort of in a friendly way say, hey, I do it like this and it works for me. Maybe you can try that. And so that's what I try to do now. And when I make my videos, that's how I try to share my experience to help maybe other people when they are struggling with anything diabetes related.
You needed a diet buddy, right? I love that phrase,
Yes.
by the way. I think it's super powerful, a diet buddy. It's really cute. So you did mention that you needed to find your why and that you did, or your whys. Would you mind sharing, like, just at least one of them? I'd love to see sort of what got you on the path to start making positive changes.
Yeah. So one thing, and I thought about this a bit before we started recording. So there's a few things actually. One thing was when you have diabetes or when you live with type 1 diabetes, you go through this eye test every year. You should have your eyes checked to make sure that there's no progression and you're not in danger of something going wrong with your eyesight. And I went to these checks every year, and it got to the point where there was already some changes with my eyes. So I had to go actually through certain procedures like laser therapy because I had the diabetes retinopathy already developed to certain stage that is not normal for someone who lived with diabetes for 10 15 years, which was me back then. But they had to do laser therapy on one of my eyes twice. It didn't hurt or anything, but I think at that point it kind of hit me and I realized, okay, if I don't change something, I might not be able to see again. So I think that like a real threat had definitely an impact on me, and I get a bit emotional when I have to talk about it, but I guess that's okay. That was one of the whys. And then I think another thing was when I had my daughter, then I also realized, okay, I want to be healthy. I want to be here for her when she's growing up, and the only way to be here is to take care of myself. And so that was another one. And there's probably a couple more, but I'm getting a bit emotional, so maybe we don't need to go into that right away. I think it also had to do with the technology and like continuous glucose monitors coming and automated insulin delivery system. And I think these things helped me a lot to get on track, because that these things kind of did some things for me that I didn't manage before, and that helped me a lot. But I think finding the why was probably more significant for me to kind of turn it around, not just the technology itself. It was really realizing that I need to change something for myself.
Thank you for sharing. Do you need a minute? Are you okay?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. I mean that I feel you. And I think that was really, really powerful. So thank you for sharing that. I think that fear, um, that you're describing as well is in all of that. I mean, I think there's also something really beautiful and positive in what you're saying, because you want to be there for your child. You want to be there for your daughter, right? And you also want to maintain a good health. I think the eyesight one, I feel you on that one. That one scares me. I don't know if that's what's driving me, but it does scare me. I've been very fortunate not to have any issues with my eyes yet, but there's always this like little cloud of what if,
Right,
what if.
right. And I remember you mentioned to me the other day that you're sitting at your clinic for your eye test, and this is not your favorite activity, like to go to see your eye doctor, that you're always a bit nervous, or I think you said anxious around this. Is that?
I want to meet one person who enjoys going and getting their eye checked. I want to meet one person who's like, yay, this is my favorite appointment of the year. But no, to this story, and I don't think I've told you it here on the podcast, to the story comes that I was diagnosed in Denmark. I'm born and raised in Denmark. How they do eye tests there is apparently a little different from how they do it in the States, or maybe just evolved over the years. I was diagnosed in 97. It's 100 years ago. So things might have changed. So I went to an eye doctor in the States. So that was right after I moved here. And no, it wasn't the first. It doesn't matter. Really beginning when I moved here. So 15-ish. No, it's got to be more. I can't do years right now. It doesn't matter. It's a long time ago. I went to the eye doctor. He did not explain anything. So this was the assistant. So, they give you the eye drops. They do all of that. That's normal. I've had that done a trillion times. He then comes at me with something I think is a syringe. It was not a syringe. It's one of those devices that measures eye pressure. I'd never seen that type of device before, at least not in that configuration. And he just comes at my eyes with it. And I'm thinking, this dude is about to plunge a syringe into my eye. I'm already anxious because I don't like this. I don't like people touching my eyes. My biggest fear is to have eye surgery one day, because they would have to put me under, which I don't think you can. Anyway, I think he's coming at my eye with a syringe. My whole body goes like, oh, and I end up throwing up in the garbage can in the office. So that was not my proudest moment. But my whole body just went into complete panic. Like, oh my God, he's going to plunge a syringe into my eye. So yeah, that was not amazing. And that's kind of what I've learned. And let's say that's also a learning, back to the, hey, what kind of mistakes we have is. I've learned that whenever I go into a doctor's office, actually this also goes for dentists, any office, I have to tell them how to handle me so that I have the best experience as possible, and so that I leave the office with all the information that I need. So if I'm anxious, the first thing I do when I get into that office is I tell them, I'm like, this kind of appointment makes me really nervous. I need you to, what I need, you might need something else. I need you to tell me what you're doing step by step. If you're about to do eye drops, I know eye drops, but tell me first. Don't just come running at me with a device. Tell me what you're doing, right? And that kind of, for me, that calms things down. It takes a surprise element out of it. And the same thing with information. If they're giving me even like non-critical information about my condition, I don't always register everything they say in the office, especially if it's like a little bit more severe information. So sometimes I tend to say things back to the doctors, like, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is this and that. So I actually just went to the eye doctor again, and that's a whole different story. It was a 4-hour visit. I've never spent 4 hours in an eye doctor office. It's ridiculous. But anyway, I was there for 4 hours, mainly just sitting in the hallway waiting. And you can't read or anything because your pupils are dilated. So You're just sitting there. Anyway, I saw first one doctor, it was like a student, and he looks at my eyes. He's like, oh, I see something, which instantly freaks me out. But he's like, well, the actual doctor is going to, tell you exactly. Maybe he's going to delete it from your file. And then they sit me in the hallway for another hour. I'm sitting in the hallway for an hour thinking, what does he mean he sees something? I've never had anyone say they saw something. I finally get in to see the actual doctor, who was awesome, by the way. And he's like, no, there's nothing. You're fine. And through this conversation, just because of my learning, I now know that it's not enough for me to just say, oh, okay. I keep asking. I was like, but the other guy said that he saw this. What do you think? What does it mean, what he said? So it's kind of one of those where the doctor's about ready to leave. They're like, do you have any follow-up questions? I'm like, yes. And then I come up with my follow-up questions. Because I'm not leaving there anxious or afraid that something is wrong. And I'm definitely not leaving the office. Like the first time when I was diagnosed with diabetes and I thought I was about to die, I thought it was a death sentence. I'm never doing that again. That's kind of a promise to myself. I'm never putting myself through that again. So.
Right. Right. Thank you for sharing. By the way, I think that's really like when I try to put myself in your shoes, it's really insensitive, not very considerate of a doctor to say, I see something, when they don't actually, seems like they don't fully understand what they see, if it's okay or if it's not okay or something is wrong. I feel like he or she maybe didn't even realize like how that might freak someone out, or I guess it would freak anyone out, when they tell you, okay, I see something with your eyes. This seems kind of serious, or it sounds serious, but at the end it was actually not, or maybe it was just wrong. And we're getting completely off topic, but I think it's important because I hear it from also my other diabetes friends who live with diabetes, that I think it's not wrong when you go see your endocrinologist or any other doctor to sort of start with kind of sharing your expectations or why you are here. Not only be there in a passive role, but also be more proactive, because that can really help you that the appointment or the meeting goes in the way that you want it to go. And I think it's completely okay to say that. And I wish every meeting would be starting in the way that the doctor asks, so what can I do for you? How are you doing? And then get some insight from us before they start their regular checklist of asking us the questions they need to know the answers to. And so this is not a mistake if somebody doesn't do it, but I realized like the more proactive I am, the more I can get out of these appointments, the better I feel. And, it's just more enjoyable, the whole experience. Still not super enjoyable, but it's not, at least not scary or anything like that. So I think it's a great point that you brought up.
Actually, it's funny because you are against is the wrong word, but you don't jive well with authority, right? It's like if somebody tells you, hey, you have to do this, you kind of instinctively want to go the other way. So I follow authorities. I've always been very like, okay, if, a doctor tells me to do A, I'll do A. So that was another learning. Again, back to the whole talking about doctors. I have learned, and that was going through some different things, not to just blindly trust what my doctors are telling me. Okay. Anyone listening, please don't go out and just do whatever. Just seek a different opinion if you don't believe it. But my example is I've had a doctor, for example, because I went into the doctor's office, endocrinologist. This is, again, many years ago. And I had noticed that my blood sugar is dropping when I bike to work, which we know that, exercise impacts your insulin sensitivity. I'd also noticed that when I had my period, my blood sugars were acting differently, which I today also know is a thing because of hormones. This doctor looked me dead in the eye, and he's like, so hormones or your period won't impact your blood sugars. And I walked out of that office thinking, okay, I'm wrong. So I think what I've also learned is to push back a little bit, because he was also the same one who, when I came back and I'm like, what's up with this? He's like, well, you're also the one who thought that biking could cure your diabetes, which is not what I ever said. I just said that I've noticed that biking would drop my blood sugar. So I did not have a good relationship with that doctor. So second learning is it's okay to push back. It's okay to question authority. They don't know everything. He was probably a really young doctor who was just learning, right? Plus, if your medical team is not working for you, again, if you can try to see if you can find another team that works for you. I see my medical team as literally working for me. And the same thing, if you have an employee where it's not a fit, well, then you have to find a different employee. I also know that this is not always doable, but if you can, find the team that works for you.
Yeah, I agree. All right. No, I completely agree, Crystal. And I think this was a great opener. And we have a list of mistakes that we think we have made that we learned from. And I thought we would maybe go through some of them. And you included some of them here that I don't think are that relevant to me, but they are quite interesting. One of the things you share with me is thinking that you have to be perfect when it comes to diabetes management. So could you maybe share a little bit on that topic? Do you think you have to be perfect, or where do you want to take this one?
I think it was a journey because I started out, I wasn't at 13 point something percent A1C like you were, but my A1C was like hovering in the eights for a really long time. And I thought that was fine. I thought I was doing great in the sense that my medical team didn't tell me, hey, we might want to tighten this up a little bit, or maybe I didn't hear them. That's also an option. I can't just say it's their fault. But that was the first thing for me was I didn't know. I didn't have the knowledge to have the optimal diabetes care for me. So I'd say through my diabetes journey, the first learning was, hey, I don't have full information. I need more information. I need to just start learning more about my diabetes. And I kind of want to do a deep dive into that. But just to talk through the story is that I didn't know. Then I started to gain knowledge. And then maybe, just because that's also my personality, I started to take it a little bit over the top and building on that knowledge, also knowing how could I get to those blood sugars that I wanted to get to. Getting into a mindset of, well, then I have to do the actual 120% within everything and trying to get to that quote unquote level of being perfect. So I think for me, it was a journey and getting to a point where I realized, hey, I don't think it's realistic because it's going to take up too much of my life to be 100%, time in range, for example. So time in range is, for those wearing a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, is when you're between 70 and 180. So being 100% time in range, never have any blood sugar fluctuations, always have an A1C of like 5.7 or lower or 5.5, whatever. So stuff like that started to become the goal. And I realized that for me, that type of goal means my life is diabetes. And I don't think that's, for me, I don't think that's worth it. It might be for someone else listening. It might be for you, Tom. But for me, that was not, it's not worth it.
Right. I mean, I really like what you said because I think the goals, like, it's not bad to have goals when it comes to diabetes management. I see goals as a good thing that work really well for me. But I think the goal needs to be sort of coming from what your why is. Once you have your why, then that should drive the goal. I think it can only work like this. And for me, okay, I don't feel like I have HbA1c goal that would be like super aggressive. I just have a reasonable goal that I know is achievable. I can do the things I want to do. I still need to take care of myself. I need to be sort of proactive in the self-management, but at the same time, it's not driving my life. Like the goal is not driving everything, but the why is. Like I said, I want to spend a lot of time with my daughter because she's small right now and I will never have this opportunity again. So I don't want, I want that to drive my goal and not that I want to be 100% in range. So, okay, now I will not be present with my daughter because my blood sugar is, I don't know, 146 right now. It's not perfect. I would prefer it to be 100 or 120, but I'm spending time with my daughter now, or now recording podcasts with you, which is driven by another goal of mine, which is to help other people in the type 1 diabetes community. So I think it's great having goals, but the right goals. And I think the goals should be different for everybody depending on their why. But I think that kind of means our goals will probably be different. We can talk about if you have any goals that you want to share, but I'm pretty sure we will not have the same goals. And I think that's actually great.
And goals to your point, can change over time, right? I think that's also so. There's a lot of talk about individualized healthcare here in the U.S. and globally, which basically means that we shouldn't all have the same goals. We shouldn't all do things the same way, which I'm a huge fan of, and I love hearing doctors talk about it. I also want to see even more of them implementing it. But I do think the endocrinologist community is getting really, really good at focusing on the individual. Also, your A1C, what is I also think it's easier for some than it is for others. If you have a tendency to do structure in your life, I do think diabetes is going to be easier for you. If you understand numbers, if you understand analytics, I do think diabetes is going to be easier. That's just completely unfair. That's kind of like just, you can't change whether or not you are good at structure or not. It's just, it is what it is, right? But my point is that we're different people and we have to have our goals built around who are we as different people, who are we as individuals. So I think that was another one going like, well, it shouldn't be perfect. And also, I'm a lot on social media. My work is on social media. I live YouTube, Instagram, WhatsApp. I'm on social, right? So that also means that I interact with a lot of people. I see a lot of people's blood sugars online. I see a lot of people's like CGM graphs online. And I do think people have gotten better at sharing not just the ups, but also the lows, so to say, rather than just showing perfect lines all the time. But I did fall into the trap, and I can still kind of catch myself sometimes doing it, falling into the trap of comparing myself to the perfect graphs, right? Because nobody has flat, blood sugar graphs 24/7 year round unless they're not alive. So it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, it's great that person over here is having a great blood sugar day, and I can look at it. I can look at their graph online. I can, cheer for them, and I'd be happy for them. Also knowing that my blood sugar doesn't have to be the same right now. So I think the striving for perfection, also the comparing myself to the sort of perfect picture you sometimes see other people present is something I've had to learn to deal with.
Right, right. And I think there is a lot of trial and error. Like in my life, I've had type 1 for 37 years. And I realized trial and error is part of learning and actually getting better with every situation, because there is so many things are going to be challenging when you eat certain food, like when you go eat, I don't know, Indian food, or when you go train for a marathon and run a marathon. These things are just challenging to manage when you live with type 1, because it requires certain skill to be able to get the insulin right for that food, or calculate the carbs right, or how to dose the insulin, how to manage the food around the marathon. This is like extremely challenging, and there's no way you can make it perfect for the first time. But accepting that, there will be some mistakes for the first time, and then learning from them, and just learning by doing the errors. I think that really helped me to learn how to actually be able to do those things. So I really like eating Indian food, and my wife hates it. So we never go to an Indian place, but sometimes I do like a takeout. She accepts the smell when I order Indian food to our home. And I just learned how to bolus for this kind of food, how to take insulin so that my blood sugar is straight line after that meal. But it was not straight line for the first time. So I'm like proud I learned this. Maybe I would post on Instagram if I see it straight line next time. But it's not like it always was this way. So I think it's also great to post those ones when we are trying something for the first time, and when the blood sugar spikes to 250 or 300 or wherever, because that's part of it, and that can actually be part of the learning. And it can, there's always two ways to look at it. One is, I messed up, I made a mistake, and blame myself. I can do that, but the other way is to look at it and think about, hey, what can I do differently next time? Like, should I take my insulin earlier, or do I need more units for this meal? Or there's many other things that can go into that. But having like a positive attitude to this really helped me to learn a lot of things. It's sort of easy to have stable blood sugars when you don't eat. And when you don't do anything, when you stay at home and take the same dose every day, okay, it's actually not that difficult. But when you live your life and want to do things, then it becomes a challenge. I think the fluctuations are part of it, and with this positive attitude, we can learn how to deal with those. Yeah, I would definitely not. I never compare myself to other people who post on social media, but I understand that that someone else might. So it's but it's totally cool if you don't compare two crystals flat line.
Yes, to everything you said. I would also say that when you go through that trial and error, and it's kind of one of the things that I alluded to earlier, but I didn't quite do the deep dive that I said I would, is that I do think that trial and error is really important. But one of the things that I have learned is that, and also by communicating with a lot of people online, is that if we don't understand our insulins, if we don't understand how they work, then it's really hard to understand how to dose for Indian food or how to get closer to those flat lines that or that A1C that you're aiming for. And I think, again, for me in the beginning, I didn't know, I didn't understand. I just woke up in the morning, I took my insulin and I jumped on my bicycle and I had low blood sugars, right? And I didn't understand. And the doctor back then, clearly, as we just talked about, did not know he didn't know either, I guess. But if I back then had understood, and it took me way too long to figure this out because I had to figure it out on my own, is that, well, rapid acting insulin, so your mealtime insulin, doesn't work right away. So when you inject it, it's not going to start lowering blood sugars the second you inject it. Most of them don't even enter the bloodstream for 15 minutes, I believe it is. It's not going to be as most effective until an hour to an hour and a half after it's injected, right? So had I known that part of the equation back then, I probably would have figured out, hey, the reason why my blood sugars go low when I go in that, when I bike, first of all, I had 50 minutes, so 50 minutes to work. So it was a longer bike ride. This is clearly back in Denmark. We don't do that here in the States, but that was in Denmark. I would bike to work. So that means that my insulin was peaking on my way to work because I would get up, I would have my breakfast and my insulin, jump on my bike for 50 minutes. I would go low every time because I didn't understand insulin. I didn't understand when it was peaking. I didn't understand that exercise increases how effective that biking to work is exercise, increasing how effective that insulin works. So I think that's been really one of my key learnings is understanding diet, understanding insulin, understanding how it impacts blood sugars so that things start to seem less random. Because when you understand the underlying things, I don't think diabetes is random, by the way. I know a lot of people say that. Maybe you have a different opinion, Tom, so I want to hear that. But I really don't think diabetes is random. I think there's a lot of moving parts, which can make it seem really chaotic. Yeah. But as we start to understand some of the main components, insulin, movement, food, for me at least, life became much easier.
Right. No, I completely understand. There is so many pieces, like moving pieces all the time. There is a paper. Actually, I share with you the idea. Sometimes we should do an episode about this. There is a paper from that tribe, which is a great resource, by the way, that I follow a lot, where they discuss, I don't know if it's 42 or 48 different factors that impact blood sugar. And they're sort of doing this at the same time. So half of them can be impacting my blood sugar right now as I'm talking to you. And some of them are more significant than others. That's what makes me feel also, the blood sugar fluctuations might not be random. Maybe sometimes they are, or we just don't really realize some of the factors, or we don't know about them happening in our body. We cannot see them. But I tend to agree, probably 99% of the time, the changes in my blood sugar are not random. And that 1% of the time, maybe it's just, I can't explain it, but it's still not random. I just don't know what's happening. I just don't know something happened and I forgot, or I don't know about it. I didn't realize. I don't even know that thing also impacts my blood sugar. So I tend to agree with that. And the more I'm learning over the past 7 years, that I'm really quite deep into these things, the more I'm realizing there is less and less randomness for me, but there is still situations where I sort of mess up or where my blood sugar gets out of control. And that's one of the factors playing that I forgot to take into account when I was planning to take my insulin or whatever. But there's one more thing that you said about your bike rides and insulin, like understanding how insulin work. That was a big one for me because I used to take my insulin and eat right away. So no matter if it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever I eat, what I used to do, I estimated the carbs I'm going to eat. I knew my insulin to carb ratio, so I divided the carbs. Say I ate 50 carbs by my insulin to carb ratio, which was 10. I said, okay, I need 5 units for this meal. But I didn't think at all about the timing. Like, when should I take this insulin? Actually, it's not always the right thing to take insulin and eat right away. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's the right thing, but sometimes it's not the right thing. Also, depending on what insulin you have, what you eat. And I know now there are meals where I take the insulin 15, 20 minutes before I eat. There are meals where I take half of it before I eat and half of it after I eat, maybe an hour after I eat it. And so I think we call this pre-bolusing, right? Taking the insulin or dosing the insulin before we start eating. I think that's important. I do that probably 80% of the time. I do some pre-bolus. And when I started doing that, my blood sugar control improved so much because my post-meal blood sugar started to be so much better. But I also realized I have to be really careful if I do this pre-bolus. If I put that insulin in my body, I really need to eat in 15 or 20 minutes or whatever I planned for. Because when I don't eat, I will go really low really fast. And so what I do now, when I know I'm a bit distracted and I'm doing other things at the same time, but I want to eat in 15 minutes because I took my insulin, I set an alarm on my phone just because otherwise I'll forget. I know I will forget. And in half an hour, I will go low. So it's a big one for me to time the insulin right before eating. It helps a lot, but it's not easy. Also, a lot of trial and error on my side, not only with Indian food, but with pretty much everything.
I think the alarm is a really good idea. I've never used that trick. What I usually do is I will dose my insulin and then I'll go cook my food or like put together my food depending on what I'm eating. So that often is timed pretty well. I do have, like, for example, for breakfast, I'm super insulin resistant in the morning. So for me, I often pre-bolus again. So take my mealtime insulin what's the right verbiage here? Much earlier. So sometimes I take it like 40 minutes. I dose my insulin 40 minutes before I actually eat my breakfast because the hormones are like pushing glucose into my bloodstream. So my blood sugar is already going up before that meal. So I'm trying to catch the hormone spike while still also pre-bolusing for breakfast. Again, back to your trial and error. I think what we talked about in a previous episode was that kind of what put me on track to really figuring things out when it comes to insulin dosing and food was when I was doing a fitness competition. Everything was very structured. I was eating the same things. I was measuring every grain of rice. And I think back to the trial and error, for me, that period of time where everything was really, really structured was kind of what set me on the path of understanding a lot of things. Because when you do the same things, you start to see patterns. Plus, I'm a pattern recognizer, if that's a thing. Now it is a thing. I recognize patterns. So I could take all of that structure, all of those learnings from having all that structure, and I'm still applying that to my life now. So I think what I would recommend anyone do, it doesn't have to be extreme. It can also be like 3 days or a week or whatever, is to apply structure to your life, figure out some of the sort of the basic building blocks for you, like how insulin impacts you in the morning, how different types of food impacts you at different times of day. Because putting in that effort, learning that was, at least for me, tremendously helpful moving forward, right? Because I learned my basics and then it's easier to, navigate in chaos later on. Not that my life is chaotic, but more chaos, more chaotic.
I agree with you. Everything gets a bit easier when there's more structure. It's easier to learn something when you have not all the 48 or 42 variables playing at the same time, but only a couple of them. Then it's easier to see the patterns and the trends and to recognize. But I think it's still very difficult, and it requires a lot of, I guess, education or like involvement or maybe even training or like discussing with your healthcare professional or someone who can walk you through these things because it can be really hard to handle. I was not diagnosed at the later age, but I can imagine that once you get diagnosed, then when you're like new to all this and you have so many things happening at the same time, that's when it can be really tricky. And it might sound easy when we talk about it like this, but I can imagine it's not that easy when you're new to all this.
I don't think diabetes is easy. I don't think diabetes will ever be easy. I do think there's things we can do to make it easier. And I think that's kind of some of the things that we're trying to highlight here, right? At least that was kind of my thought about it, is say, some of the learning, some of the mistakes I've made has led me to a point now where diabetes has become easier because I've learned from those mistakes. Because I now know diabetes, because I now know insulin better, that means that I can apply that knowledge to my everyday life, and it becomes a little easier. Whenever I interact with newly diagnosed adults, caregivers, whatever, that's always my thing is, what I tell them is, this is probably never going to be easy, but it can become easier. I also think there's a lot of tech. That's not really the topic of this podcast today, but I do think there's some tech now available that can also help make life easier, right? There is now smart insulin pens. There's even an insulin pump where you don't have to count carbs. You just put in him eating a small, medium, or large meal, and it does things for you. They're coming to market that aims at helping us to make things easier. And that's for me, that's what life with diabetes is about. It's about trying to make it a little easier without trying to be perfect in the process.
Yeah. And I just want to sort of double click on something we talked about before, because you talked about structure, that structure can help to be effective during the learning, or let's say understanding the patterns and everything like that. And one of the mistakes I was making looking back was sort of like I already had a lot of understanding of how insulin works, like how different foods impact my blood sugar, how different exercise impact my blood sugar. But I found myself always like, I know all these things and I'm trying to sort of like wing it. So I will, okay, I know this is what I eat. Okay, I look at the plate. This is how much insulin I probably need for this food. And I'm going to for a run after that. And then this and that and all these things. I'm just doing this in my head, doing some sort of calculation, how much insulin to take, how to adjust my basal rate, everything like that. And I don't write anything down. And I think it's really difficult to be effective in like recognizing the patterns and learning when you don't see things on the paper, like either looking at your graph from your ECGM with certain notes, what you did, what you ate, or like keeping a journal and writing these things down. I know this is like very old school. This is what I was supposed to do when I was a teenager, to keep a journal. I never had any journal. I always just take some insulin and be done with it. But that really accelerated my learning when I started doing this. And I was always bad at keeping a detailed journal. But for certain things that I found challenging for me, then writing things down, let's say for the Indian food, because I always order the same one. So I write down, I took 8 units 15 minutes before I ate. And then I could see what happened. And I write it down. I know, okay, 8 units was not enough. Next time I take 9 or 10. And then I write it down. And then I change the time, I change the dose. And suddenly, after 3 times writing it down on a piece of paper that I probably lost by now, but I now know how to do it. I already remember it. But hadn't I written it down, I would probably not figure it out until today, because I would just forget what I did last time. And so I think keeping some sort of journal that doesn't bother you too much and that you can stick to really helps. So that would be a mistake that I made and that I learned from. Now, whenever I have something challenging, when I see with this activity or this meal, I'm struggling a bit, then to write it down a few times, that usually helps me figure things out.
I've done that before. And now I have to pluck my logbook. Gosh, I have it right there. That is my logbook. That's my logbook. It's available on Amazon, because to Tom's point, what I did was look at that. I tried to make a structure. I had like a little Post-it post-it notes at one point, and I was writing things down, and I was like, this makes no sense. So I created that notebook exactly for that. That was to make it easier to create structure. So it's available on Amazon. It's called the Diabetes Logbook, and it's by me. So
Right.
you can find it there because I do really think there's power in logging. And I started doing that. I didn't get a CGM until, I think we talked about this, 13? No, later, 2015, I think. So before that, it was only finger sticks. And you can get to really good diabetes management only using finger sticks. Do I think CGMs help? Obviously, because we talked about that before. But if you don't have access to it, finger sticks can get you really, really far. But you have to write things down. So I'm absolutely with you on that. Winging it is, it's going to take you longer time to figure things out. Also, another thing I think is important to mention in that context is changing too many things at a time has also, in my experience, not been the best recipe for success. So, for example, if I notice that, hey, I go high after breakfast, then changing my breakfast, changing my insulin dose, changing my activity level, like changing everything at once just means that you have no clue what's actually working. Instead, I would go in and change my insulin or change my activity level or change my breakfast. So one thing at a time and be structured
Definitely.
about it.
That's a good point.
I will say about structure, I don't think it's something, especially if you don't have a structured like mindset or structure just makes you want to rebel. I don't think it's something that you have to do all the time. I think dedicating a week or again 3 days to figuring something out can be super helpful. And then you can go back to less structured life. And then once in a while you dedicate 3 days in a week or a week to structure to figure things out. So take it a little bit in bites. Yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
how I would do it.
And we will put a link to your logbook in the video description later on, right? Is that okay? If someone wants
Oh yeah.
to
Yes, please.
go get it. Because I think, I'm not getting paid for saying this by Crystal, but I think it's super affordable because it has so many pages where you can take notes, and it costs like, I don't know, $7 or really, like it's quite cheap, I would say. So I think it's a good value for money.
Thank you.
Anyway, we stop with the promotion and we move to the next.
And this was not planned, guys. I swear this was not planned.
No, Crystal didn't ask me to plug it, but I thought, why not? Because it goes with the topic, and it's okay. As influencers, we can promote something. So something that adds value. So next mistake, Crystal. We still have a few on the list. I have chasing our CGM, and then I have lack of planning. Which one should we go first with?
I kind of think we really hammered on the lack of planning because that's kind of also structure. I think that chasing the CGM is a way more interesting one, but in the sense that, as I said, we talked a lot about CGM, so continuous glucose monitors, in a previous episode. If you haven't checked that out yet, I recommend you do that because you really get like the nitty gritties of our perspective on, as I said, since around 2015. So when I first got it, so what it does is it tells you 24/7 what are your blood sugars. I had a monitor, like a little receiver back then. Now I get the readings on my phone. And when you first get that information, I think, first of all, for me, it was fascinating. I love data. And I was like, all of this is going on. And I would look at that screen all the time. And the thing is, first of all, I mean, a CGM is about, 10 minutes behind your actual blood sugar because it measures in the fluid and not in the actual blood. And every time I saw a little change, I would react. If there was like, oh my gosh, my blood sugar is now trending upwards a little bit, I'll take insulin. Or, oh my gosh, now it's dropping a little bit, I'm probably going to go low soon. That's kind of like the mind logic that was going on. So I was reacting to every piece of data in isolation, which I think was a huge mistake because it meant kept overdosing insulin, kept overtreating.
I think it goes both ways. It can be overtreating when you see your blood sugar dropping. Overtreating doesn't even need to be a low blood sugar or a hypo, but just eating when you don't really need to, or when you see your blood sugar moving up, correcting, taking insulin maybe too early or too much of it, just because that trend or that number on the CGM freaks you out. And I used to do that too. I think we talked about it in the CGM episode when I just started with the CGM. I was definitely overreacting to the numbers, and I don't do that anymore. But it took me some time to actually realize, okay, I should not look at this every 5 minutes. Only when I want to take action, then I should look at this. But having said that, obviously there are times when I react to my CGM numbers when I see my blood sugar is just higher than I would want to be, that it's just not it's been there for a while, like it is right now. Actually it's 160 and it's been like this for a while, but we're just maybe going slightly up. I know that because I have automated insulin delivery, I know my pump will correct this. But if I was not recording, I would probably help it a little bit manually. So there are times when I react to it, but it's not based on a one-off number or just like immediately when I see the trend, only when there is a good basis for it. I don't know, Crystal, I know one of the mistakes people talk about a lot, half of the people with type 1 or maybe all of them say that when they go low, when they have low blood sugar, when they really feel the hypo, it's like such a terrible feeling that we tend to overtreat the hypo, the low blood sugar. Just eat whatever we see, like drink all the Coke, eat all the candies, eat all the fruit, everything, and from the low blood sugar it becomes high blood sugar within an hour or two. Do you also struggle with that?
So I think what you're referring to is that really low blood sugar feeling where you want to eat everything in sight. You just want to empty the fridge. So actually what's going on, to be a little bit of a geeky, is that there's a lot of hormones being released. One of them is like hunger hormone. So not only are we feeling really bad, we might be I tend to sweat shake when blood sugars get really, really low. We're fighting that. We're also fighting the hormone that is in our whole body. So I do think that that's a really challenging situation. I don't get there very often because I wear CGM, so it warns me before my blood sugars go that low. Also, I don't really feel my low blood sugars, which is not ideal. I'm not completely hypo unaware. But so to answer your question, I'm rarely that low and feeling the symptoms to that degree that I do feel like eating the whole fridge. I have put a structure in place that if I have a low, for example, structure, I'm a structure over here. But for example, if I have a hypo during the night, a low blood sugar, I don't leave the bedroom. I don't go into the kitchen. I'm not going to put myself in, I'm not going to put myself in that type of temptation. I'm going to stay in the bedroom. I have glucose tabs. I have juice in my nightstand. And that's all. I mean, the juice I buy, these like little fruit pouches, they're 15 grams of carbs. It's measured out for me. So I think for me I don't go in the kitchen, not even during the day if I'm having a low, again, temptation. So I don't go in the kitchen. I have portion sized, which is 15 grams of carbs. Low treatment, I'm not going to be standing pouring juice. No. I want portion size. And I know people hate on glucose tabs. I'm a big fan of glucose tabs because they're super easy to measure out and they're portable. So if I'm out and about, I can just, grab 3 tabs if I need that. So do I still have those episodes where I overeat? Yeah, I'm human. But they don't happen as often because of those things that I just mentioned. So what about you?
I guess I don't have that much structure in place as you have. Sometimes I put a package of glucose tablets to my bedroom, but usually at some point I finish the package because when I go low, I usually need like 3-4 glucose tablets, which means like one package with, I don't know if there's 10 or 12, 3 hypos, and it's done. And it just happens, so after sometimes a few weeks, maybe a couple months, it's gone. And usually I'm not very good at restocking. This kind of thing is just, I don't do it until more. Right. So, okay, I'm covered for 3 nights, but fourth episode, I have to hit the fridge or I have to hit the room where we have not only glucose tabs, but all kinds of other things like chocolate and stuff like that. And actually, I find it really hard to kind of control myself. When my blood sugar is low, especially like in the middle of the night, I would just eat whatever I see first. Like, I don't know, it's really hard. So I think having that kind of structure, that kind of thing on your nightstand is a really good tip. I think my wife would tell you that you anyway need to go brush your teeth after you eat it, so you have to get out of the bedroom anyway. But maybe you don't have this problem, so you can get away without it. I hope she's not listening to this. And but yeah, I think this, maybe I should restock more often, or I should keep more in my bedroom so I don't have to have these night adventures in the kitchen. But
I do think
I really like glucose tablets as well. I know she's like the most effective way to treat low blood sugar for me. Even if my blood sugar is dropping and I see it's just dropping too fast and it's getting to like 80, 75 and it's still going down pretty fast, I will just take 1 or 2 glucose tabs, and that really helps me. I don't even get in that situation where I would have this hormones going on and me getting extremely hungry. So glucose tabs are great because they work really fast and you can control how much you eat easily, because 1 glucose tab is 3-4 grams of carbs depending what kinds of you have. But I really like them, but they're not tasty. I don't know if you have some that are tasty, but it really works. So I do that too. But I have Coke here as well. They're not sponsoring us, but just in case.
It's your brand. It's funny. I mean, with stuff like that, again, it's too hard for me to sort of gauge how much I'm getting. I mean, if you drink the whole thing, that's like 240 grams of carbs, right? And I'm guessing. I'm totally guessing. I actually don't know. So that was just a from the hip guess. Am I right?
Oh, well, it's 10 carbs per 100 milliliters, which is, okay. I know you don't do that milliliters in the US, but this is half a liter. So this will be 50 carbs.
Okay, so 50.
I think.
Okay, so I was way off. As you can hear, I don't really drink Coke, so I had no clue. That would also have been like ridiculous. Anyway, what is the weirdest thing you've ever eaten during a low? Do you even remember?
I don't know. I don't think I ate anything weird. I don't remember. Like, do you have an example of what you consider weird?
So I asked this question online at one point because I don't think I have any like super weird things either, but people were like, cheese with ketchup on it, or just like they've been out and they're panicked, so the only thing they could get their hands on was like actual like ketchup packages. So like eating ketchup packages because there's sugar in ketchup. So what is it? Like weird combinations of like pickles and peanut butter. It's just weird stuff. Weird combinations.
Yeah. So I mean, like I've done just sugar bags, like that if I had nothing else on me and I was somewhere where on an airplane or in a restaurant where there was sugar on the table, I would just get the like pure sugar in me or like mix it in the water. I don't think that's weird enough. I didn't do ketchup with cheese, but ketchup actually that's a good one because that has a lot of sugar. I've done like jam, so like a spoon of jam during one of my fridge adventures at night. That works too. It works like quite fast.
Nutella.
Yeah.
Like
the
straight out the
Nutella doesn't really work that fast, does it?
It does not, but this is not about raising blood sugars. This is about blood sugar brain, just doing whatever blood sugar brain want to do, which for me is like stuff like that. And you should also just, explain to folks if they don't know why Nutella wouldn't work out fast. Do you want to give that a go?
I'm not an expert, but I think Nutella has a lot of fat content, and the fat basically slows down. There is sugar in Nutella, but there's also a lot of fat, so it will never be raising blood sugar as fast as glucose tablets or Coke, because those things only have carbs, like pure carbs, and the fat is just making things happening a lot slower from my experience.
Exactly.
Same is with chocolate. Like chocolate is not the best because it takes forever. So when I try to treat my low with chocolate, I eat a lot more chocolate and then I regret it 2-3 hours later. But
it's gonna hit your blood.
It's what it is.
Super hard later. So it won't even raise your blood sugars that fast. It's going to hit you later. It's the same thing with things that are really high fiber. If you're really low, then eating an apple might sound like a great idea, but there's a lot of fiber in it. Whereas just drinking a glass of apple juice will raise your blood sugars faster. I feel like for me, I just want something that works fast. And that's why juice or glucose tabs is my go-to. For a real low blood sugar. So that means when I'm down there where it's also uncomfortable and or if I just want to raise it fast, right? If it's a preventive low blood sugar treatment. So like, for example, if I'm out for a walk and my blood sugar is slowly dropping and I'm like, okay, if I don't do anything, I'm going to go low.
Hmm.
Actually, I often bring glucose tabs. So I'll take a glucose tab to your point. But I mean, if you have a few grapes, if you want to go with something that's not glucose tab, that might also work, or dates or something.
Yeah,
But that's more for
that's a good
preventive,
one.
I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. So turning this around to high blood sugar, because like
Mhm.
again, and this is something that I'm definitely guilty of, because when I'm high, I want to bring my blood sugar to like a normal range as fast as possible. And that's usually really hard to do because it takes time for, whenever I take insulin, I do the correction. It just takes time for the insulin to get in the bloodstream and to start working. There are obviously ways to make it work faster. Like when you go for take that insulin and go for a walk, that will make it work faster. Not always I can do that. Like when I'm sitting down here, I want to make a correction. I cannot go for a walk. So what I'm definitely guilty of is this. I know people call it rage bolus. When you see your blood sugar is rising, it's going high, you do a correction dose. 1 hour later, still rising, still going high or still high. I do another correction dose and I stuck up that insulin like it's just too much. So later on, I know I will crash, but I'm still guilty of it that sometimes I just overcorrect. And I'm pretty sure when we stop recording, because I see I'm 162 now, I will correct. And because my pump is already correcting automatically, I will probably overcorrect. But that's me. I'm just totally guilty of overcorrecting my high blood sugars. So that's my mistake. What I learned is I can't really help myself. Like I can't really help myself. So what I do is sometimes I intentionally overcorrect, and then I know I will be going low. And I just again set alarm on my phone 45 minutes, 1 hour, just to check and maybe eat something. Because I already have that insulin in my body that's correcting. And if it's just correcting too much just to prevent my blood sugar going low, I would eat. So I know I should not be overcorrecting, but I anyway do, and then I kind of adjust for it later on. I heard someone calling this crash it and catch it, like crash the blood sugar and then catch it before it goes too low. So that's what I do. Do you also overcorrect sometimes, or are you more
Yeah, range
disciplined?
balancing is it. No, I mean, we're not recommending it, but yeah, no, I know what you mean. So when you have those either climbing blood sugars or just like I call them stubborn highs, the ones that it just seems like whenever you throw insulin at, it's like throwing water on a duck. It's just like no matter what you do, blood sugar's just like do, 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 do. I'm not hearing you. I'm just doing. It's like a stubborn child, I guess. Just like keep rising, and it's so infuriating. So I think that's also where it comes into the rage, is that it's so infuriating that you just want to like scream and do some, and your scream is like a lot more insulin. Absolutely, I do that. I sometimes mix the inhaled insulin, Afresa, with the injected insulin just because it works faster. So I'm just like throwing everything at it. I'm not as structured as you, which is wild to say. I need to, I guess, learn from.
Possible.
I know. But yeah, no, I should definitely set an alarm. That's a really good point. Saying, hey, okay, it's going to max out in about an hour. I should keep an eye on it. I don't do that.
I don't think
Looking
it's true that
structured.
you're less structured than me. I just think we use different tools. Like you are structured with your glucose tablets in your bedroom, or with other things, and I'm just structured with setting an alarm. But like I have no other choice because I know I would forget. I would just forget about it. So it's not I mean, it's just for me it's a necessity. This is something I have to do. And I think it also depends like on your life situation. Everyone has different setup at home. When you have small children around, you cannot really be structured. And like if some things need to happen, you need to set that alarm. Otherwise, they just don't happen. I think when you have different setup at home or in the office, then maybe you don't need that alarm. So I think
That's a
we're
good point.
structured
I
in
mean,
different ways.
and that's also back to what we talked about at the beginning. It's like, this is in no way going to be like, hey, you should do like we do. This is about, take whatever you need from our learnings and leave the stuff behind that's not going to help you. And just, we're all so different. And I'm going to say this in every episode. I'm going to say it for the rest of my life. I really do not think there's one way of managing our diabetes that's going to work for all of us. I think we're unique individual humans, and we need to figure out what works for us, right? Back to your point, what is your why? What drives you? Also, so what is your structure level? And just what are your goals? Figuring all that out for you, and it's okay if it changes over time.
Right. And I know
soapbox.
Yeah. So I know I shared like my why, or a little bit of my why, and I'm not sure if you have, and you don't have to share anything that you're not comfortable sharing. And I apologize if you actually shared it and I forgot, because as I told you earlier, I had a migraine this morning, so I'm a little bit slow today. But if there is something of your why that you think would add value to me or whoever else is listening to this, that you wouldn't mind sharing, I would love to hear it as well.
I do think some of my why is just, how do I say this? I don't think it's necessarily fear. Fear is the wrong word, but I do want to prevent complications. I don't want to lose my eyesight. I don't want to, end up hurting my body. So I definitely do have that component of wanting to maintain my body. I want to live a life. I want to be able to still go for hikes when I'm 80. I want to be able to have an active life with my husband and enjoy that, my siblings, my parents, all that. So I do think that's part of it, is I want to be able to be active, I guess, with the people I love. I do think a lot of it is also just for me being from day one, just thinking, okay, this is part of life now. This is what I do. And that has kind of made it sort of more of a, not emotional thing for me, but more like automated thing, automated thing, I think. Why it's just something that's there. It's not, I don't feel as such any way or other about diabetes. It's just there. And I think clicking into that mindset for me has helped just make it is what it is kind of thing. So
Right.
it's
Thank you for
twofold,
sharing
right?
that. Yes. Thank you for sharing that, Crystal. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I know this can be a bit personal, and I didn't give you chance to kind of think it through. So I really appreciate you talking about this. And I think what you said will resonate with a lot of people, because I know once I made a video on YouTube, and I kind of talked about my why a little bit, and it was more prepared, and I had it kind of drafted, so it was kind of like clean, not the way I shared today, where I didn't really prepare it in the same way. But then I asked those who were watching to share their why, and I have to admit my audience in YouTube is usually people who are older than me, or the same age as me and older. Many of them shared similar perspective. They just want to sort of stay healthy and be able to do things with their families and with their loved ones, and be able to be active at a later age. And I think that's something that we all want. If I go back to my earlier years, if you ask me, do you want this? I would probably say yes, of course. But then to take this and put it into action is a whole another thing. So I think what you said definitely will resonate with a lot of people, and hopefully we were able to bring some tips or tools that will help someone. But thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And I think it'd be really interesting if any of you guys watching, listening, want to share some of your key learnings as well as your whys below this video, below this podcast. That would be amazing. I'd love to hear from others as well.
Yes. And if there are some mistakes that you made in the past, and maybe you learn something from that, that would be really interesting, and I'm sure inspiring to hear, because we all have different stories, and we all can learn from one another. And I'm learning from Crystal every time we talk. I'm learning something from you. So I actually didn't realize when we were planning this that there would be so much learnings for me in this, just by listening to what you're doing in your daily life, and just getting the individual pieces of your story and like putting the puzzle together. That really helps me connect the dots, and I'm sure I will apply some of those learnings of yours in my management as well.
And absolutely the same. I think that's the power of conversations. The power of conversations between diabuddies is that we learn from each other, right? I learn from you every time as well.
All right, Christelle, I think this was a great conversation, and I just want to thank everyone for tuning in to this episode of Diabetes Unlocked. And as always, if you enjoyed the episode, hit that like button and subscribe to our podcast, because we will have a lot more chats coming for you in the future. So thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time. Ciao.
Bye-bye.